For 17 years, Dave Brubeck headed a jazz quartet that was probably the most popular, highly paid, well-traveled and publicized, and the most durable ensemble in the annals of American jazz. That, coupled with tours abroad for the State Department and record-breaking sales of his recordings, has brought him a worldwide fame, countless popularity poll awards, and his likeness on the cover of Time magazine. In 1967, at the height of its popularity, he disbanded the quartet to devote more time to serious composition. His major work, an oratorio on the theme of brotherhood, was premiered by the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra in 1971. Although Dave Brubeck continues to perform, it's with a new group now, his own sons, three of whom are jazz artists in their own right. Mr. Brubeck, recently, you've capped years of success with a quartet with playing with your own family, three of your sons. You were just about to tell me that there's a fourth coming along out of 6 children. It brings to mind the old saying that, kind of a paraphrase of the old saying that the family that plays together stays together. How has this affected family life to be playing together professionally, constantly, as you now are?
I would say it's been very healthy because you're just together all the time, and therefore...
Is that good?
You have to communicate a lot more, and my children have seen what 20 years on the road that I've spent is like, and they
weren't with you.
No, they haven't been with me except this last year, and now they realize
when you were on the road, they weren't with you. They didn't travel with you.
Only as youngsters, when they were not in school. They've all been to Europe on tours with me a lot. If it's vacation. We try to plan vacations so they can go with us, like Australia and New Zealand in August. I'll take the 13-year-old boy, and whenever they're not in school, they go along.
I've read that when you were playing with a quartet, there were times when, as is natural, the quartet could barely stand each other because you were together so much. This is not the case with the family?
At present, but you got to remember that Paul Desmond and I started together in 1946, and the group came to an end in '67. That's 21 years. It's kind of a miracle that we still consider that we're friends. But you learn to avoid. You try to make the stand be the place you communicate on stand. During the day. It's best if you're not eating every meal together and hanging out together, as they call it, because then you can communicate as musicians better. Even to some degree with my sons, I do that, but not as much.
How do you communicate non-verbally in a group like that, through music?
It's constantly interaction, reaction. You have to sense in jazz immediately what the other guy is thinking, the direction he's going.
Sense? I mean, it's just intuitive? They're not...
By hearing and feeling, and then if you're providing what you're supposed to be providing, a good background for the soloist, you let him dominate. So each one of my sons dominate the group if he's a soloist.
Do you send messages?
Oh, yeah.
How do you send messages?
Well, just by a glance or by something that has nothing to do with the eyes. All the senses are completely going in an improvised group. Eye, ear, everything. It's kind of like a Catholic Mass where they use incense. Even the lights, the ornamentation of a church, everything makes you react on stage.
Is there a kind of exaltation to it?
Yeah, sure. But every type of response comes like a light in your eyes can make you want to play with your eyes closed. Then you think differently. And you shut out the audience more. But you react to all these things. And if I'm playing where there isn't a light in my eyes, I might play it in a different way. Like where I've played lately, I'm looking out over the entire New York area. When I look up from the piano, I'm on the 65th floor of the Rainbow Grill. And that gives me a different response than, say, looking into a blank backstage.
So each experience is a new experience.
Absolutely.
In that sense.
Right.
You took up music at a fairly early age, but not with the intention of becoming a musician. Your mother was a piano teacher, as I recall.
Right, sure.
But your father had a ranch, didn't he?
Right. I was going to be a cattleman and a veterinarian because my two older brothers are both musicians, and my father, me being the last son he had, he decided that somebody had to run the cattle ranch, and I was his last chance. And I thought I was going to do that.
You wanted to do it?
Absolutely. When I got to college to become a vet, my first year, I was across the lawn from the conservatory, and my mind would constantly go from the problems that I would have from dissecting a frog or something like that. I'd be hearing the people practicing across the lawn and start just analyzing what's going on in the conservatory and just letting what I'm supposed to be doing slide.
What experience did you have with music up to that point, before you got to college?
Well, I was around it. My mother taught music. My brothers played. You would know the bands my brother played with. Del Courtney, Tom Coakley.
Yes.
Del's band rehearsed.
All out in Northern California. Then you grew up, of course, in the foothills of the Sierra Mountains in Northern California.
I was born in Concord, and there I used to hear Del Courtney's band rehearsing in our house. Then when we moved to Northern California, my brother played with Gil Evans, who was one of the finest arrangers in jazz. So I knew great musicians through my brothers, but I was being trained as a cattleman. But I had both.
You didn't read or write music in those days, did you?
Right. No, because I wasn't trained formally like my brothers.
You just picked it up?
Well, I was around them, and my mother gave up on me because my dad said he's going to be the cattleman. Now, she would say, don't let him rope the cattle. My dad was a champion rodeo. Have you ever seen rodeos?
Oh, yes.
He won first place at Livermore. You remember those rodeos?
Yes,
as double team roping, you know. And you can lose a finger so fast in roping because my dad did not allow hard and fast, where the rope is tied fast to the horn of the saddle. But you had to rope, which I did, take your deli welta, which is your turns, and if you have one finger out there, you're never going to see that finger again, which my uncle, who always went around saying, gee, I could have been a great pianist, but I lost my finger roping cattle. So I had all this going on in my youth, where I would play in dance bands because I had been around music, been around my brothers, but I was going to be the cattleman. But finally the music won out.
I gather it was pretty much the influence of a single professor at what is now the University of Pacific that brought you into music.
You bet. Yes, J. Russell Bodley said, you know, Dave, you got a lot of talent going for you. And he would defend me at the conservatory when they'd want to kick me out.
Why did they want to kick you out?
Well, I couldn't read music. And he'd say, but he's got a great ear, and he turns in, he struggles to write compositions that are very good. And I had 2 or 3 professors that would always defend me, and then the rest of the school was very much against me. And the last thing the dean said, you're a disgrace to the conservatory. But if you promise never to teach music, I'm going to let you have a degree. And I promised never to teach, and I was going into the service at that time, right out of school into the service. And I kept the agreement pretty well. I didn't teach. I didn't embarrass the College of Pacific. But as things got better for me, the college recognized that I had gone to school there. Phi Mu Alpha had blackballed me every year, so I couldn't be a member, and they made me an honorary member. That's the only way I could
Everything
get
was
in.
retroactive.
Everything. And then the teachers that really had said, you know, stay in there with Brubeck. He's got some talent. Well, they were great to me. They really were.
Was it jazz from the beginning?
That's all I really liked, yeah.
What happened in the Army?
Well, I enlisted in an Army band, in Riverside, California. But we needed troops for the invasion of Europe, and they took us all and put us in the infantry. And I was sent out as a rifleman, and when I got ready to leave the East Coast, I told the lieutenant in charge, I said, well, I've never done any basic training yet. And he said, well, that's impossible. I said, well, I haven't, and we're all musicians, and if we're going to go fight, so he looked on the record and he says, that's right, you haven't. So I'm going to put you through basic training in about 2 weeks. So I had to do everything. Any place in the camp, if they were shooting bazookas or firing hand grenades or BAR, whatever it was, he woke me up day and night. He made it a personal vendetta that he's going to get me trained and ready for the invasion. But I missed it by 3 months, and then I went right from France right up into Verdun, a place called the Mud Hole, where we were stopped. And at the Mud Hole, there were some Red Cross girls came up on a truck to do a show. And they asked if there was a pianist that could play for them. And I volunteered. I hadn't touched the piano for months. And I remember the side of their truck dropped down, and that became a stage, and then there was a piano in there, and they rolled it out. So I played that night, and a general heard me. And in the morning, my outfit was supposed to go up and point blank go up to impossible situation where we could not bomb and get through. And this outfit had to go up there point blank, and they faced the worst kind of situation. But he had pulled me out that morning.
To play the piano? To
play the piano. And I stayed with him. That was in Patton's Army, just behind the front, and formed a band. And I was in that band right through the war. And he did not want me to go into the front, and he just kept me back there.
Were you developing your own style during this period? Was it an opportunity at all to experiment?
Yeah, sure, because I had no one over me. I became a PFC in charge of a band, which was a beautiful situation. Yeah. And when he was told to send all his men up to the front, he said, if you don't get out of here, Brubeck, you got to go to the front, and I don't want you to go to the front. So take your band and go up through this area, and wherever you can, entertain the troops. Well, we went right into the bulge. We were unloading, and when that whole breakthrough came through. So I was very fortunate in that I was one of the first to retreat and get out of there. But that's the kind of situation we were in the whole war. But I had mostly frontline troops that were wounded. And I would tell the guys, you know, if you got the Purple Heart, wear it, because these guys are in no mood to have USO come up here. But we look acceptable to them. And I wrote a lot of interesting music, I thought, like Prayer of the Conquered, We Crossed the Rhine, original things that would communicate with the frontline soldier.
When you came back out of the Army, you went to Mills College then, didn't you?
Right, and I studied with Darius Milhaud there.
Why Darius Milhaud? And Mills College then was, of course, a women's college. It's since, I guess, become coeducational. But why Darius Milhaud?
Well,
since jazz was your interest.
My brother was Milhaud's first graduate student with Pete Rugolo, who was Stan Kenton's arranger later. As male students, it was impossible to get into Mills College, a girls' school. But he was allowed to go in there. And then he set it up so I could study with Milhaud after the war. And Milhaud was absolutely interested in jazz. He was the first one to use jazz and classical together before Gershwin. A classic piece that Leonard Bernstein and most conductors say is the best piece written for classical and jazz is Creation of the World, which Milhaud wrote maybe 3-4 years before Gershwin wrote any of the things he used with the jazz feeling. So he was very interested in jazz, which was a switch from most conservatories in the United States where you were not allowed.
So he encouraged you in your ambitions in jazz then?
Yeah. And when I got there, I asked many of my friends like David Van Crete, San Francisco musician, Paul Desmond, Cal Jader, people that everyone would remember, Dick and Bob Collins, and Bill William O. Smith, who's a tremendous avant-garde composer. We all started studying with Milhaud, or going to classes where Milhaud would encourage jazz, and he'd say, now when you do your homework, do them for jazz instruments. And my first group was formed in Milhaud's class, the Dave Brubeck Octet, which you may remember.
Yes, I do.
And
yes, I do.
It was homework assignments that became our library. He said,
Is that where the polyrhythm and polytonality began?
Yeah. I studied with Milhaud, who was the most advanced in polyrhythm, polytonality, and believed in that more than atonality. And so we had all these hours of his time to kind of shape us in what I think is the most valid direction. That
I get you must have had great admiration for him. Your oldest son, of course, is Darius Brubeck, named obviously for Darius Milhaud. Was it tough getting started, Dave, with coming out of this classical tradition with Milhaud, with a kind of classical jazz? Jazz wasn't thought of as being close to classical music in those days, as it is to a greater extent now.
Well, I went to Milhaud with the idea that the jazz I was writing and playing was not allowing me to make a living. The average San Francisco dance hall did not want to do the kind of rhythms. You couldn't dance to the things I wanted to do. The country was used
strictly
to
listening jazz. Huh?
Yeah, and to do what I honestly wanted to do, I really couldn't get a job in most clubs. So what I did finally, in order to work, was take the rhythm section from the Octet, and then I was allowed a chance to work in the San Francisco nightclubs. But when we would go in there with the Octet, it was so avant-garde that people didn't know what we were doing. So my wife wrote to every school on the West Coast stating that we would like to come on campus free or whatever they could afford to pay with the Octet and do a real musical program of compositions, improvisations, and standard jazz thing. We divided the program.
You felt the college audience would be a more receptive audience?
Yeah, and people didn't know what I was doing, and now...
People weren't playing college concerts in those days, were they?
No. I think we opened it all up. There might have been a few occasions where Benny Goodman or Duke Ellington played some college concerts, but we just came in and opened up a whole new market, and people said, well, jazz belongs in the dance hall and the nightclub, and I said, no, it belongs here, it's just as valid.
Yeah.
It's really more valid because people are really listening in a concert rather than drinking.
I've been trying to recall what happened to you in Hawaii that was a turning point. Was an accident there of some sort, wasn't it?
I almost did myself in there swimming, and from the rumor of that first got back to San Francisco, I was paralyzed for life and all that. I was hospitalized out there, and gradually I could use my arm and my hands and play. It took me years to overcome that because...
to overcome what? The physical
injury.
Limitations?
Yeah. And I had to play differently.
What about the psychic limitation that such an accident would put upon a musician?
Well,
his whole future was before him.
Yeah. Well, from that Tripler Hospital in Honolulu, I wrote to Paul Desmond. It was hard writing because I was in traction, had a weight on my neck for 21 days. But I told Paul the outline of the new group I was going to form with a quartet. And so rather than being the end of my career, it was really a beginning of a stronger career.
So often things happen by these kinds of accidents, don't they?
Right.
Over the years that you had the quartet, and which was so highly successful, traveling all over the world as an ambassador, as I remember it was Mort Saul who said that after John Foster Dulles ruined things in a country by his visit, the State Department sent you along to straighten them out. And I gather you picked up a good deal of your ideas and inspirations from these visits that you made abroad. Obviously, the travels in Eurasia and that sort of thing. You began to weave the music of other countries into your compositions.
Well, you see, jazz was so locked in simple time signatures, and there was no good reason why it should be. But I remember
that limited the influx of new.
Most jazz was in 4/4 or 2/4, and occasionally you have 3/4, but hardly ever. And we started playing in 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, which I consider to be much more African than what jazz had been, very much European march kind of approach, very unimaginative rhythmically. And I had been teaching a jazz appreciation class in University of California Extension, you remember, on Powell Street?
Oh, yes.
And I had listened to the Dennis Roosevelt expedition into the Belgian Congo and heard all these fantastic African rhythms that should have been in jazz. Now, they might have been in the earliest jazz, but there weren't too much. It's very hard to find things in 5 and 7. There's one thing I've heard of, an African field call. It's about the only thing in America. But we started doing all these things where you got away into complex rhythms where jazz, I feel, should always have been. And there was an outcry that I wasn't playing jazz. Well, always from traditionalists. I don't care what I've ever done. When the traditionalists start screaming, you always know they don't know tradition. Like if they tell me I shouldn't play jazz in church. I've done many oratorios I've written. I'll have to explain to them that Bach was using the drinking songs of the day, that "O Sacred Head Now Wounded," the original text that everybody in the congregation would know was, "My love has gone and left me, and I am all alone, I cry into my beer stein." They'd all know that. Then Bach would take that melody that the congregation knew, reharmonize it beautifully, make it fugue out of it or whatever the treatment was. But he knew that the audience or the congregation had to be involved. And the church gradually destroyed art where they had been the center of art. Now you see things coming back. But
Which led you into the composition of liturgical music? You've done, what, 3 major compositions?
Yeah, I'm
least,
working on a
you?
4th one now. The war, when I was 21, I wanted to write a piece in condemning war, condemning just the whole idea of it. But I didn't have the tools, so it took me till I was, what, 48 or 47 to finally figure out how to get it all together and write it down. But the last piece I called "Truth Is Fallen" was a condemnation of truth.
Kent State, wasn't it?
Kent State, truth in the United States. Again, people didn't know what I was up to. Now they know. Took Watergate and a few other things. But I wanted a way to speak out for what I thought was going on, and also what I believed in. And I think every artist deserves to have that right at some time in his life.
To express his own feelings in a medium that's his medium.
Right.
What about improvisation? This seems not to fit with what you've just said of musical composition. But improvisation, of course, is again a mode of expression, but a different kind of mode of expression, is it not?
Well, again, traditionalists will say there shouldn't be improvisation. Then I say, well, you don't know tradition. And then go back to the idea pre-Bach, and even during Bach's time, Bach must have been the greatest improviser. Maybe Mozart equaled him, where that was all part of the tradition. And it's nothing new I'm just doing something very old when I improvise on the thematic material that I've written. It's not new. It was part of tradition.
Dave, there must be moments in your work, either when you're alone playing with your sons, playing concerts or whatever, moments of more than usual satisfaction. You spoke of the kind of exaltation of the playing together. What are those great satisfactions, moments of great satisfaction when something seems to come to you? Is it when you hear something in your inner ear that results in a composition?
Well, it's so hard to explain, for me to explain. I'd rather quote Stravinsky.
That's not a bad source.
From Poetics of Music, where he says that composition is selective improvisation. And that says exactly, as a composer, I can take 4 years, as Brahms did, till he wrote another note in a symphony that was hanging him up. And the time element in music, where you're capturing time of the moment, is so much in jazz. You can't take that time. You've got to make the next statement, and you can't stop, as Stravinsky says, selective improvisation. It's immediate improvisation. Now, the greatness of improvised music, and jazz has done more to keep it alive outside of some organists than anything else, is that you're making immediate music. Like if you write a book, time isn't captured. If you paint, it isn't captured. This is probably the only art form where you capture time immediately.
Yes, the moment.
The moment is captured. And in Dr. Zhivago, Dr. Faustus, when he's describing creation as a composer, he says, when the flush is on the cheeks and you're writing, well, that's the same thing that happens in jazz, only you don't have to write it. You don't have to see a conductor not quite get it, and an orchestra wish they're not playing it, and all the things that happen in between as a composer that dilute that flush on the cheek is in jazz, in improvised music. So I'm a great believer in improvised music as being the most direct to the people of the moment of what you're thinking, more than any other art form.
Dave, in 15 seconds, what have you learned from the younger generation?
To listen. And a lot of things I objected to, if you listen hard enough, you see their point. And I listen a lot to my sons. I think I learn a lot from them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.